Hello everyone, my name is Tejas. I am one of the people in the SWG group for your class, and I'm going to be giving a quick overview for front-end technologies. Now, this is going to be a two-part video. The second video is going to be made by Sriram, and he's going to go more in depth for some other concepts related to an actual framework. I think the one he's using is going to be React, but I'm going to be giving a lot of conceptual information about components, routing, as well as how to debug front-end whenever you're developing it. So the things I'm going to go over, I'm just going to start off with the evolution of web pages, how historically they evolved over time, the difference between what HTML websites were and more modern day websites are, how components fit into the picture, give a couple of examples, and I'll also be coding a few examples in this video. And I'll also make sure to link a GitHub in the description below so you guys can access whatever examples I work with, and as well as any links to any resources. I'm also going to be covering the syntax, which is going to be a little new for anyone who has only gotten coding experience from UTD. So that part might be useful for you. And I'll also give some more examples after that and debug them in this video. So to go ahead and get started, to explain the internet when it started out, it was basically made for academia. Anyone who had research papers or wanted to publish their work wanted to use the web to actually get their work out there. Now, scientists being scientists, they didn't really care much about styling. In this project, in your semester-long project, you're going to want to have your information there. That's what the backend and database are for. You need to have some functionality. But if it's not presented right, you're not going to get a good grade. So that's exactly what front end is there for. It's more than just drawing. It's actually to make all the information accessible in a nice, neat format. And chances are your project's going to have a little more than just text. But that's how the internet started, just plain text. In this page right here, it's just an HTML page. You can even tell from the fact that the URL ends in .html. That means all of this is rendered just through an HTML file. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And what that means is that it basically just gives text. The only things that HTML had when it was starting out was a different font for titles and then a paragraph. And then maybe some dividers if you're lucky. And you couldn't even change the font or the styling or add any colors aside from just linking to other pages and anything like that. It was just pretty bland. Now, people wanted a better way to actually style their websites, and that's where CSS came from. Now, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and it was kind of like an extension to HTML or an add-on. And if you've seen Tushar's video, he covers this as well. CSS was basically used to add colors to anything in HTML. So in this web page, which is a little newer, you have any highlighting or different colors, especially for the text. Like you have white text over there, which you wouldn't be able to see if it was black. And then you could also add dividers and so on. And a lot of this, it also did use a different syntax, so there was a bit of a learning curve, but CSS made web pages a lot more engaging for people to actually look at. Now, as web pages caught on, you could also change various factors with the HTML itself. HTML and CSS both evolved, and you also had JavaScript, which came into the picture. JavaScript was basically a language that added more logic to any buttons or anything like that, but I won't be covering much of that. Now, the next advancement after plain HTML, CSS, as well as JavaScript was individual components, which is what JavaScript actually supported. Now, if you go onto your machine and you press the key F12, or if you right click and say inspect, you can actually see the individual parts of a web page. So for here, for example, I'm in Firefox. If you're running on Chrome or Edge, you might have a different console. And if it's on the side, if it looks different, that's fine. But the basic components are going to be the same. Now, if you just scroll through the code of the actual web page, you're able to see this HTML and CSS since it's rendered right there in front of you. And that means that as you're going over the code, you can actually see where each of these components are actually shown in the code. For example, I'm highlighting this dropdown right here. All of the code that was in here applies to the paragraph section. And what that means is that the web page can be split off into different sections. I have settings to the right to control the text size if I want to. I have various pictures across the web page and everything like that. And this made websites a lot easier to use. But it also made it a little more complicated, which is what we're going to get into. And you are going to have various components in your web page. And then, of course, as styling caught on, it also evolved further. Now, this is a stock example of Svelte, which is a different framework from React, but I'm just going to use this later to actually explain how individual components work. Now, before I actually go into depth on what components are, I do need to cover the HTML and CSS syntax because it's a little different than what any of you are going to be used to. Now, I'm going to go off the assumption that a lot of you have gotten the bulk of your coding experience from UTD's courses. A lot of you have already gotten coding experience from outside of that, whether it be through epics or club programs or anything like that, which is great. But there are some of you who only have knowledge with Java or C++. And when it comes to front end, the syntax is going to be a lot different from what you're used to. So HTML uses a system called tags, and you could think of it as brackets or parentheses, and how you would use them in Java or C++. So, for example, I did mention that this is just an example of Svelte. This is just an example website, and this is the code for that. This is one of the Svelte files. Just for this video, think of a Svelte file as a JavaScript file. There's not really much of a difference between them. But as you can see, this code may look a little different from whatever you're used to. So if I was coding in Java, I can make a simple for loop. I could just say I have an int, and I can, yeah, there's an example right there. I can make a simple for loop, and that would easily give me a way to iterate through multiple things. And everything within this bracket right here would be iterated upon. You could think of it in a similar fashion, except instead of having a loop, you have some kind of attribute. So let's say I want to add something to this page. Let's say I want to add a paragraph. In that case, I would use the paragraph tag, which is simple enough. In this case, VS Code finished the tag for me and added a closing tag, which is the same tag but with a slash at the beginning of the tag. And you could see examples in other parts of the code, like right here. There's the opening tag and there's a closing tag. Now, in between these tags, since I use the p tag, that means whatever is going to be here is going to be a paragraph. So hello, or you know what, just hello world. That's simple enough. Now, if I go back here, yeah, it popped up. It's in a weird location, I know. That's because I chose a pretty random area in the web page to plug this in. But that's a simple idea of how tags work. Now you can embed anything that you want. But the thing is, not all tags work the same way. Some tags have an opening tag and a closing tag where you can edit and place several values in between those tags, while some are also just single tags. So that means that there is no closing tag to them. You just put one tag in general. And let me get an example of that. Okay, so to take an example, let's look at this piece of text right here, this line. Let's say I wanted the bolded text over here to be in the line right below. In that case, I would use something called a line break statement. And that piece of text that I just highlighted is this snippet of code right here. Now it's using a header2 tag, which just means that it's a little bigger than regular text. And this is the bolded text right here. So let's say I want to, well, just make it on the next line. Now that's not going to work. I actually have to put something called a line break, and that is this tag right here. And that's actually going to indent it to the next line. And the funny thing about this is that it doesn't have a closing bracket. So that's, if I wanted to put a bracket with a slash and then BR, then it's not going to work. So the code is just fine like this, and it's not giving any errors. So if I say save and head back, and now it's on the next line. But now it's not centered anymore, and that doesn't look great. And this is where CSS comes in. The CSS syntax is a little like attributes that you might put in a Java class. For example, if I just expand this, portion right here for this random piece of code, you can see that inside the tag there's an attribute defined, and it's set to whatever welcome is. And that's because you can actually add different categories of CSS. You could think of it as passing an object or a class pointer to a different method or function within Java. So in this case, there's a bunch of CSS attributes over here that's defined. You have the width, which is defined as 100%, height, and padding, and so on, all of which is set to the attributes of welcome. And over here, it asks, hey, what class of attributes do you want? I just want the welcome class. Now for centering our text, it's going to be a little simpler. So I would just say style is set equal to text align. I think I pulled it up here. Yeah, this is the one. So I would say text align and then to center. Now, all of these attributes are held within the opening tag of your HTML. So this is going to apply to all the various texts within these tags. So even though it has a strong tag over here, it's still going to apply to it because it's in the tag above that. So if I save that, go back to my web page and refresh that, everything is centered now, and it looks a lot more pretty. Now, I know a lot of this information won't make sense or will be hard to remember, and that's fair because whenever you look at tags like h2 meaning header 2 or br meaning line break or strong meaning bold, it doesn't really, it's not something you can actually use intuition to guess. So that's why I would highly recommend actually going into various tutorials, like whether it be on YouTube or W3 Schools, and actually getting a knack for the syntax. And I would really recommend using W3 Schools, since as you're going through the exercises, you'll get a handle on how exactly this various tags work, and the same for CSS and JavaScript as well. Now, there is another resource that I didn't use for my own project, but it really would have helped if I did, and that's called UIverse. And here you can pretty much look up any kind of button or component that you might need, and you can actually test them out, see what they look like functionality wise as well as visually, and you can find the HTML and CSS and just plug it into your files. Now, of course, to actually make those components fit your web page, you'll have to know how to edit the coloring, the size, and the positioning, and for all of that you have to understand the actual syntax. So still go through the HTML and CSS. You can't just copy paste various things and call it a day. You actually are going to have to understand how these work. Now, when it comes to components and how they help with routing and working with the backend, all of that's going to be in Sriram's video when he explains the framework itself, and I would highly recommend checking out his video as well, since he's going to go a lot more in depth. Now, right before I call it off, there are two more things I'd like to show. If you really want to put some more effort into it, there are websites that give CSS when it comes to shadows. I can't say that you get any more points for it, but if you want to explore the artistic side, that's there for you. And then the very last is debugging. So when it comes to front end, you can have a component render on the front end, but sometimes you might not be able to see it because it's buried under other things. So that makes debugging a little bit of an oddball. Now, there is a tool that exists in Microsoft Edge as well as Chrome, but not in Firefox. So if you go to Microsoft Edge and you inspect a website and go to 3D view, then you can go ahead and actually get an understanding of how these websites work. So for example, you can see the entire web page here. You can highlight various components and it'll highlight the according component on the entire web page. So as I scroll, you can see that the header over here doesn't change position. And you can also see that there's a really long component here that's rendered, but that we can't actually see on our screen. And of course, that's the various languages. And as I scroll that, the component in 3D view accordingly changes. And you can use this to actually see how different components are actually rendered and how they're used. Now you can also use this for other websites just to see how they work and get an understanding of how different things are rendered, how they're organized on a web page, and how you want to associate text. And then for Google Chrome, it's a little different. You'll have to do Control-Shift-P and look up layers. And then that'll get you the same 3D view as Microsoft Edge. And then, of course, Firefox used to have support for this, but I think it was discontinued a while ago. So, yeah, just go ahead and use whatever you think will help your project the most. Now, that is a complete overview of how exactly front-end components work and the various resources that might help you. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to reach out. You have our emails, and I'll leave a lot of these resources in the description below. And if you have any questions, just shoot us an email.